Oh, shoot. Welcome to Andy Staples on 3. Wait, that's not the name of the show anymore. It's Andy and Ari on 3.
I wasn't even going to correct you.
I thought I would eventually do that. I don't know if I'm surprised that it happened this early or I'm surprised that it took this long. But you say the same thing for over a year and you get...
Yeah, you know what it reminded me
memory.
of? It reminded me of the Nick Saban radio show at Baumhauer's. And the host of the radio show called Kalen DeBoer, Coach Saban, like the first time he was there for the radio show.
I mean, that's serious muscle memory there. That's just how it works. Well, it is Andy and Ari on 3. We are blessed to have Ari Wasserman here. And we are blessed to have an incredible guest on today's show. Ohio State head coach Ryan Day. Ari, we're going to be talking to him in just a minute. This is a guy, listen, he has been beaten and battered throughout the offseason for not being able to beat Michigan. But I would say probably stocked his team better than anybody else this offseason, other than maybe Lane Kiffin.
Yeah, on one hand, because Ryan Day is such a nice person, you kind of feel bad for the fact that he has taken as much flack as he has. And I've given him quite a bit in columns in the past. But the reality of the situation is that, you know, beating Western Michigan 49-0 and winning a bunch of Big Ten games against Maryland and Rutgers is not the job.
That's right.
The job is to beat Michigan. The job is to win national titles in each of the last 3 years, which I think is the longest streak since I was on the beat starting in 2009. Of not winning a Big Ten championship. Like, that is just partially because Michigan came up and became one of the most consistent programs of the last 3 years, but partially because I think he's had some game day failures in that game. And I think that he would probably be the first to acknowledge that, you know, whatever has been happening has to change. So, you know, on one hand, Ohio State's in a very interesting position right now because they have a roster that is able to compete for a national championship, maybe the deepest, most talented roster in the country. That helps people forget about what happened the last 3 years a little bit, but the pressure is off the scale because you cannot fail with a roster that's this talented and this deep.
No. And we'll talk to him about that. And we've joked, you and I have joked about this. Like, is Ryan Day enough of a psychopath to succeed at Ohio State? Because we think about the really successful head coaches, your Nick Sabans, your Urban Meyers. They are not the type of person you would expect to bump into at the PTA meeting. And Ryan Day is.
Exactly.
So but maybe you can do that. I mean, I think we're kind of seeing that with Kalen DeBoer at Alabama too. Like, can he do that? And also, is that what you have to be in this new environment?
Yeah, now that you have a whole new different sliver of talent retention and relationships when it comes to keeping players from going in the portal, I wonder, and here's the thing, like, you could call, having covered Urban Meyer, and we both did.
Yeah,
but
as beat writers.
My entire career was the beginning of it was the 7 years of Urban Meyer in Columbus. You know, he is a robot to a certain extent. You know, it's get stuff done, win. You know, he ruled in that way. He wasn't a very personable guy.
Right.
You know, like I saw glimpses at times with the cameras off where he became funny and a little bit different. But I'm wondering now if the pendulum is going to have to swing back from robot to person in a way that you have to be more likable and nice and caring, and you have to remember people's names and all the things that are important of just human basic relationships.
Yeah, we had a former Ohio State player that we bumped into who talking about dealing with Ryan Day, dealing with Urban Meyer, and this person who was a really good player at Ohio State in the past was like explaining, like, getting introduced to Urban Meyer like 5 times in the first week. And like the 5th intro finally stuck.
Yeah. And I saw it happen with recruits and stuff too. And I was like, there are some people that are just like that. Like
Steve Spurrier, like, he would call you my man if he didn't remember your name. And that's almost everybody's my man.
Yeah. I mean, I'm kind of like that too, where somebody will introduce themselves and then 4 minutes later, I'm like, what's this person's name?
Yeah.
Like, some people just have a gift and a knack. Like Mac Brown probably has the gift on the other end.
Oh, he remembers your name, how it's spelled, what your wife's name is.
If you brought him a Coke in a restaurant 12 years ago, he'd remember who you are. So, you know, it's not a criticism of Urban Meyer. It's just a thought process of the type of personality you have to be successful. Because even when he was coaching, there were people who loved the idea of playing for him, a meritocracy. You win every single rep of every single day. Yeah. And there's some people who didn't want to play for, they wanted to play for Dabo Sweeney type. I mean, personalities vary, but I wonder, when you think about the most successful coaches in college football right now, Andy, which ones would you say would mirror the Saban Meyer? Smart. The only one is Kirby Smart, and he was an All-American safety.
I will say Kirby Smart around football players is not the Kirby Smart you see in the media. Kirby Smart, like Bob Stoops was like this, where he had a different persona for the media and a different persona for around his team. And it was a lot more like that. And I think both of those guys have the same trait, though. They were both good players in college. And so for Kirby Smart, like every player who comes to Georgia at some point is reminded that Kirby Smart was an all SEC safety. Like he can do more because they respect that. He can go harder because they respect that. I think it's harder if you weren't a dog in college. You didn't already do the thing these guys are trying to do.
Yeah, and you're so bogged down in process as a head coach, you know, and we know that as the sport progresses, the number of minutes spent on football diminishes and decrease every year.
Yeah.
You know, and there's so much more to this than there used to be. And really, 5 years ago, I still would have said that 75 or 80% of the job was talent accumulation. Now it's talent retention.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's NIL fundraisers and all the different things that a coach has to do that has nothing to do with football, when football is the main qualification for getting the job.
All right. Well, before we get to Ryan Day, I want to remind you that Andy and Ari on 3 is presented by Wendy's. You've had Wendy's Nugs dipped in sauce, but have you had them covered in sauce? Wendy's new Saucy Nuggs take the crispy and spicy nugs you love and turn them up to 11. Choose between flavors like buffalo, honey barbecue, garlic parm, or if you're a real heat seeker, try the spicy ghost pepper only on Wendy's signature spicy nugs. I dare you. That's 7 delicious ways to try the nugs you already love. Pick a flavor. By the way, you can also go hot on the barbecue, hot on the buffalo, which I highly recommend. But pick a flavor, grab some extra napkins, and prepare to nug like you've never nugged before. For a whole new way to nug, it's got to be Wendy's at participating U.S. Wendy's. All right, let us talk to Ryan Day, because this guy, he's got maybe the best roster in America, but certainly the highest expectations in America. Joined now by Ryan Day amidst multiple Heisman trophies, national championship trophies. And what's it like walking through this every day to work, seeing what this place has done?
Yeah, I think, you know, you walk through, you know, the lobby here, and you certainly see all that has come before, and then you kind of walk down the halls and you see the coaches that have come before, and then you continue down and you know, you just learn more and more about, you know, what the program is, you know, for people who just, you know, are coming in for the first time, or recruits. But, you know, whether you're recruiting or you're a coach, one thing about Ohio State is, you know, you have to understand, you know, the history of the program and where it's come before, and why we're where we are right now, and then where we're going, because there's so many changes going on in college football. So I think it's very, very important, and we do as good a job as anybody of selling our traditions and our history here at Ohio State, because again, I think it's very important for our guys now more than ever to understand why it is the way it is. Why is our fan base so passionate? And then where are we going as we move forward, and making sure that we're making the decisions that are best for what we have.
Ryan, I've asked you a lot of questions over the years, and I've got some interesting, funny questions that are kind of serious. Okay. So let me just ask you this out of the gate here. We're a podcast. We're just chilling. Sure. So you guys are up 42-0 on Saturday. It's happening, Andy. I tried to talk me out of it. And you're facing 4th and 1 from your own territory with a freshman quarterback who was a 5-star in high school. And you might have thought about punting or running the ball, but you run this wonderfully designed play that springs a touchdown. Did you know what the total for the game was, the over-under, and how happy it was, the people leaving? He told me not to do it, but it's funny, because in a world where people who come to your games are judging you based on those numbers, how aware, if at all, are you of these things? And does it change the way that you guys approach what the expectation is going into a game?
Yeah, no, I know that's real. So yeah. It's definitely a fair question. But no, I honestly, when we got done with the game, I didn't even know what the score was. I'm being dead serious because, what we're trying to do, and I think you can see us just coaching on the sideline and getting after it and trying to coach these guys up, is we're trying to get as many reps as we possibly can for our guys because, we've learned, in the past, and I've learned in the past how important that is because in this season in particular, like it's going to be more games and these guys got to be ready to play. So these are valuable reps. And what we can't do is just, take the air out of the ball and just say, okay, let's just get out of the game. And sometimes it puts us in a little bit of a situation in terms of our respecting our opponent. Like you'd say, well, it's 4th and 1. Why don't you just punt the ball and move on and get out of the game? Well, that's a rep that Julian's saying can't get back. That's a rep for Bennett Christian catching a touchdown pass. And you learn about these types of things. And so we're trying to get as many reps as we possibly can, certainly respecting our opponent in that moment. But I just felt like the more these guys can play, the better off we're going to be as we move forward. Get it on film, grade it. And then there's something about, you remember and you learn. And some of our guys for the first time are out there learning because they make mistakes, you learn. If you've done it before, then you can remember. But the only way to do that is to actually do it in the game. And so that's really what we're focused on. We'll look up at the end of the game and see what the score is.
How much more critical is that now, in not just because of the playoff where you might have to play 16 games, but also because the way NIL and the transfer portal have worked, I feel like it's a more efficient market now. Like the guys who would have been sitting here or sitting at Alabama or sitting at Georgia waiting to start aren't. They're going somewhere else to play. So when you have the opportunity to get Julian say in a 4th and 3, how important is it to have that?
It's huge. It's huge. And so that's one example. But when you look at NFL rosters who play as many games as they play, and now, close to as many as we're going to play, it isn't always the top end guys that you're talking about. I mean, they turn over their roster constantly, like in the bottom 10 to 15%. Well, when somebody gets hurt now, you can't just sign somebody off of waivers. So it's everybody involved. It's, the 4th string running back. It's the 3rd string, left guard. It's like, for instance, in the game on Saturday, Denzel Burke gets taken out for targeting. I mean, what a great example of how Jermaine Mathis has to step in that game and play at a high level. And then what if Jermaine goes down in the game? Now you're on to your 3rd or 4th guy. And so all of these guys getting reps is going to be important because you can't just sign somebody off of waivers. And that's also important for practice. It's important for morale. So, I'm glad we got that done the first couple of games.
Ryan, you guys bring a lot of really highly talented recruits into this program year over year. Transfers that come in are also ready-made guys. The talent level on this roster I've seen firsthand for over a decade of where it is in comparison to most other places. But can you contextualize for me just how good Jeremiah Smith is at receiver? I mean, we were having a legitimate conversation with Bill Landis at dinner last night about whether or not you could even compare him to Marvin, and the guy's been on campus for what, a few months?
Right.
Like, let's a real conversation of how good is he?
Yeah.
Is that a crazy thing to even be talking about?
Well, I don't think it's crazy for you guys to be talking about it. I think it's probably inappropriate for me to talk about in that he's only played 2 games and he's so young. And I think the easy thing to do is to get out in front of ourselves. And, I think if I'm starting to talk too much about that, it's not a good look and it's not fair to him. I mean, he still has to be young. He's got to make his mistakes. He's got to grow. And, I think he's a hard player to have a comp with because, his size, his explosiveness, his ability to run, his approach, he's very mature for his age. So just like everything else this year, I think the key is just for him to be able to be who he is and try to get better every day and have great practices and, make mistakes and learn from that. I mean, everything he's doing is for the first time. So I know everybody's excited about him. We are too, trust me. He is a special player, but I think we got to just kind of take it 1 week at a time right now.
Can you tell when you're recruiting someone, because you're recruiting him for 3-4 years at this point, and we see it from the outside, and there are 5-star guys who show up and they're as advertised. There's some who need work and then eventually get there, and then there's some who don't work out at all. Can you usually tell when they show up if they're going to be that as advertised guy? Like when you first saw him work out, was it like, yeah, we got one here?
Yeah. I mean, we knew in high school. Probably one of the most impressive guys we've seen coming out of high school. I mean, it was one of those ones where, like you said, there's some guys that develop at different stages. Whether it's while they're here or Marvin's a guy who really came on late in his high school career, and then as he got here, really took off into his freshman year or sophomore year. Everybody kind of does it a little bit differently. Jeremiah was one of those ones we saw in high school. We knew how special he was. I mean, he's one of the better high school players I'd seen. And Caleb Downs is another one. I mean, he's probably one of the best high school players I've ever seen live in a game when he played against Buford down at Buford when he was at Mill Creek. I mean, he was all over the field, just unbelievable. So, but everybody's different. Everybody kind of has their own journey along the way. But yeah, it was pretty easy to see that. And I don't think it takes, a veteran, scout to identify that he was going to be a great player.
I don't know. That one right there. I legitimately still probably would have gotten it wrong, but
I think you could have got that one.
Ryan, your resume with developing quarterbacks has been off the charts in terms of what they produced in college and where they ended up in the NFL. The quarterback that you have here this year didn't come up through the program the way that you have typically done it with other guys. What's it been like to have somebody with as much experience as Will Howard, and has the experience of being a quarterback developer coach been different with somebody in this new era of college football where you might hopefully not have to do it, but might have to in the future?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. And, we work really hard at developing our guys. And what we asked them to do, I think CJ would tell you sometimes, we asked more of them here than when he was, with the Texans in his first year. And so, whether it's been guys who have been here and gone on, you look at, Quinn, he's done a great job. He was only here for 6 months, but I think he learned a lot when he was here. Joe, when he was here, you've seen Kyle doing well as he's left. But we've also, done great with the guys that we've had here. And, Will, to your point, hasn't been in our system for very long. He just got here in January, but I think every week he's getting more and more comfortable. He's getting more and more of a feel of it, and it's going to come down to red zone. It's going to come down to third down. It's going to come down to 2 minute. But the thing about Will is, first off, he's got great command, but also he can make an effect in the game with his feet. You saw that on Saturday, and we're counting on that to be the difference. But I think every game he plays, he's going to be more and more comfortable. I think it's important to get his feet going. I think when his feet are in rhythm, you can see he got a rhythm early in the game. He can make those throws, and certainly stuff to grow on and build on. But every day he's in it, he's going to be more and more comfortable. He'll become a better and better player.
What's it like when you have a first-year quarterback with you who can say something like, well, I remember when we were playing in the Big 12 championship game 2 years ago, this happened, this defense did this, and this is how we responded to it. How much does it change what you and Chip, the discourse between you guys and Will?
Yeah, here's what he didn't have to learn here. To your point, playing in big games, toughness, demeanor, the way to stand in a huddle and look people in the eye. I mean, those are all things that he's already got. And so that certainly does, allow us to get further along in the process. So it is big. The spotlight's not too big. He's been through those type of things before. So that was good. It allowed us to kind of a jumping off point that was further ahead.
When you first were hired as the head coach here, I went up to New Hampshire and met people that were close to you and spent some time in Manchester. And during the reporting and the story that I wrote, I found out how important Chip Kelly was to you. Having him back here in the building, calling the offense, his wisdom, what's it been like, not just from like a play calling standpoint, but just like having that person with you next to you in the program?
Yeah, it's been big. It's been big. Yeah. I like the way that the offensive staff has come together. I feel like Brian Hartline's done a great job, and Justin Fry, Keenan Bailey. I mean, everybody in that room, Carlos Laughlin, but to have somebody who's been through, so much football in his life. He's been a head coach before. He's been in the NFL. He's done all those things. It's just a great perspective coming in with a fresh set of eyes on everything that we're doing here. I think the great thing is that in that room, everyone kind of sees it the same way because we've been together for a while. But for someone to come in from a different point of view, but also, a lot of what we've done here was what he did because of what, I learned from him when I worked for him. So It's not like this is like way out of left field, but along the way, you start in a path together. One guy goes one way, the other guy goes the other way. And then we're bringing it back together again. So it's been great. It's only a start, but it has allowed me for sure, like even just being in a game and not carrying a call sheet is a weird feeling to me. Like I always feel like I need to grab something, and I don't know what to do when I don't have a call sheet in my hand. But it certainly in the game has made me much more aware, eyes up, involved with everybody in all three phases, looking people in the eye. It's so that part has been good during the games, and so, but I think so far he's done a great job, and it's also great to have somebody you trust and and that's big.
Be honest, when you were playing for him, was there ever a time he got on your ass at practice and you're like, someday, old man, you're going to be working for me?
No. I can tell you we definitely had
although he was a young man then. So
we've had arguments before, but I think that's what's great about Chip, and talk about trust, is that like you can have an argument, you can challenge each other, but at the end of the day, you're going to have each other's back when you walk out of the room. Where sometimes when you don't have that kind of trust or that relationship, it can create issues and problems. Not here, and that's big, because he's very, very competitive, and so am I, but we see things the same way. And so there's just, and it's a collaboration. It was the same way when he was the head coach. We were always kind of had that relationship, and it's carried over here.
You mentioned how it changes your game day. How has it changed your week?
Yeah, I'm able to kind of spend more time on third down, red zone, and, seeing things a little bit further away. I can spend more time on special teams, take a look at what's going on the other side of the ball, have some conversation with Jim Knowles. I can be, in the facility more, I can be down in the training room. I can be with the players, there's just more to it. And then also just time to gather my thoughts on how I need to, talk to the staff that week, how we need to message the team that week. And it's good to be able to just be with your thoughts every now and again too, because before that, there was just so much going on. You're constantly thinking about what to call and how to organize the game plan. So all those things have been positive.
Well, I would also think too, that in this new era where so many things have changed in the last 2 years, that being a head coach, I always used to think, and this was my percentage, and I don't know if you guys agree with this, but I always thought that like 4 years ago, before the world changed, that 75% of the head coach's job was talent accumulation, 25 was culture, game planning, building. I don't know if that is a insane number.
You didn't leave any percentage. We're a bad at math show, by the way.
Yeah.
He didn't leave any percentage for actually like play calling, scheming.
That was like 5%. I don't know. No. You work out the math for me when we're done here. But now when you think about the NIL stuff, the way that players are moving in the portal, and all the stuff, that the actual roster management of it is more GM like in the NFL than it ever has been before. How much has your life changed, in the last few years, being at a place like this where the demand is no drop off, win every game, right, but also having to stay on top of, well, if somebody's unhappy, they might leave, or if I need a quarterback, I might hurt someone's feelings. Like there's all these different things that you have to have on your plate. And I'm assuming that that's been maybe one of the hardest adjustments of being any coach at this point.
Well, I think when you have an opportunity to be a head coach, typically it's because of the football. Right. But then when you're thrust into the role, that's less of what your job is. So to your point, and in order to move up, you got to give up. And I think for us here at Ohio State, it's been important to recruit at a high level, develop, and then retain. Very, very important. We've added, a lot of people talk about our roster, but we only added, I think, 7 guys, and it's not like we're rolling guys over in the transfer portal and going out and doing that. So that's been very, very important. The culture of our team and making sure that that's big. Talent acquisition is very, very important. I think when you talk about like from, January all the way to June, I think that's where it's the most different, going to different events, meeting with folks, going out and doing these different events. We have a concert here that we put on to raise money for NIL. We have, there's just a lot going on in terms of fundraising and phone calls and things like that. So very much more involved with that to make sure that where we need to be. And it's been great working with Ross. Ross really comes in with a great background of this very thing. And as we, kind of move forward, trying to figure out what's right for Ohio State as we go. And a big part of that is going to make sure we continue to recruit at a high level and develop and retain. And then when it's right, fill holes in the transfer portal.
So I want to wrap up with this one, because Ari just mentioned this is Ohio State. Drop-offs not allowed.
Right.
Bad years don't happen. What is the pressure of that like day to day? And has it changed for you 5 years into the job versus when you first got the job?
No, it hasn't changed. I rember, that press conference, and it was like, you got to beat the team up north. You got to win every game after that. And that's the job, but I never looked at it like, what if you don't? I've always looked at it like, what if you do? And the opportunity that Ohio State has to offer. And try to make every decision we possibly can to make sure that we understand, like, this isn't just, right now. Like, we have to win right now, but we also have to continue to what you're talking about. We can't have a drop off. And so making all those decisions was something that you learn year in and year out. You learn more about yourself as a coach. I'm now 45 years old, and I'm in a different place than I was a few years ago. And every year you learn and you grow, and you learn more about Ohio State. You learn more about where we're going. You learn more about being a head coach and making those decisions and making sure you have the right people in the right spots. And, we've been right there before, and what is it going to take to make sure that we get over the hump in those different spots? And that's where the focus is. And you learn every year. And, I think for this group in particular, there's a lot of guys that have played a lot of football. We've been talented before. We've been young at times. And I think, having a guy like Seth McLaughlin come in, having a guy like Will Howard come in who are, new to the program, but also have experience, is going to be important.
Well, you're going undefeated this week.
Yeah, right.
You got that going for you.
Improvement week. Yeah. We're calling it improvement week because everybody else in the country is getting better. They're
That's
playing. Right. So we're not treating it like a bye week. We're treating it like an improvement week.
Maybe head to Chili's or something. Get yourself like some Southwestern egg rolls or something. Give yourself a break too, because I know it's going to be a long season.
It's going to be a long season, but we got to keep working. We'll get some rest this week, but we're going to have a normal practice week. No game on Saturday.
Thank you, Ryan. Appreciate it.
All right, guys. Good seeing you guys. No problem.
That is Ryan Day, and it was interesting hearing him talk about how his role has changed and how he is more of a general manager because NIL has completely changed everything. And our friends at Prime Video have a new series that dropped today about how NIL has changed everything. They followed Livvy Dunne, Angel Reese, and Jayden Daniels throughout the year at LSU last year, got insider access to all of it. Take a look at the money game.
Can I see how I look before we start? July 1st, 2021, the NIL rule changed. That's the day my life changed.
The schools were reaping the benefits of the billions of dollars in TV contracts.
For almost 100 years, no one challenged it.
Now, the Livvy Dunnes and the Angel Reeses, they're getting 6- and 7-figure deals.
The more eyes you got on you, the more people are going to try to tear you down.
I do get a lot of inappropriate comments.
All the stuff that they say on a daily basis is disgusting.
You're playing on the biggest stage every week.
Angel Reese is not active tonight.
Could you expand a little bit more on why Reese didn't play?
Yeah, I could, but I won't.
I don't have to tell you guys everything that's going on in my life.
And now, for the big moment, your 2023 Heisman winner is...
I guarantee there's some girl out here who's trying to get their hooks into Jayden Daniels.
I'm not going to let anybody take my focus from the game.
You don't have to play the money game, but if you want to capitalize, you can do that.
I love the game. I could also take care of my family for generations.
We thought of everything that would happen in NIL.
I would have $100 in my account as one of the star athletes at LSU, and I was confused why.
Reebok is a question mark.
They didn't reach out to you?
No.
The whole team is so excited to have you.
These athletes are in a pressure cooker.
I remember saying that I wanted to be done, but winning is addicting.
I think this is the beginning of it, and it's beautiful.
So 6 episodes of the Money Game dropped on Prime Video today. I'm going to start binging this thing tonight. If you would like to watch, you can subscribe to Prime Video using the link in the show description of this YouTube video that you're watching. Also, if you're already an Amazon Prime subscriber, use that link anyway. Helps out your old pals, Andy and Ari, but it will get you directly to the Money Game, which I can't wait to watch that, Ari. And it really has changed everything. And the fact that those 3 were in Baton Rouge at the same time and they could follow all 3 is pretty amazing.
Yeah. The Money Game, otherwise called Life for everyone
exactly.
else, is going to be an interesting look into just kind of how this entire college athletics world is. And we all know and understand that this is happening, but to get a absolutely close look at how it looks is amazing, because so much about NIL is just like what's behind the scenes, who's doing what in the shadows, who's the broker, who's the handler.
Right.
There's not a lot of stuff that's out in the open. So to be able to see some of these things come together,
and how it all works these are three people who kind of experienced it in different ways, because, Livvy Dunne's a gymnast. That's not a super popular sport, but she's exploded. Jayden Daniels, meanwhile, is winning the Heisman Trophy as all of this is going on. And like, how's it affecting him? And then Angel Reese is trying to defend a national championship. She's in quote unquote contract year where you're playing your last college season going into the WNBA. Like, it's a really interesting set of people to follow.
You can make a case that they were three of the most visible people in all of college athletics last year at the same 100%. Time. So I'm looking forward to watching that as well.
So let's talk about that in relation to what we just talked about with Ryan Day, because he's talked about now his job is part general manager. And one thing he mentioned, we were talking to him, that I think is interesting, and I'm not sure has been explained enough, is they did not overhaul their roster through NIL. Everyone's like, they bought a team. Well, they did buy a team, but the more important purchases, I would say, are making sure JT Tuimoloau and Jack Sawyer came back. Getting Caleb Downs and getting Quinshon Judkins obviously is a huge addition. Getting Seth McLaughlin, huge additions, but they already had a good roster because they'd retained it. But I think the way they did it with Will Howard and adding those guys, like, that's kind of how you want to do it. It's what Michigan did last year. When you got a hole, you fill it. So Michigan got Drake Nugent, Ladarius Henderson, Josiah Stewart last year. They didn't need much else. Ohio State didn't need much else, but they got the positions they needed.
Well, it will be interesting as we get more data with how to win big in the new era, if the Michigan model from last year becomes the model.
Yeah.
Michigan doesn't recruit nearly as well as Ohio State does out of high school, but they had a lot of very good players that were evaluated well. Jim Harbaugh and his staff did an amazing job of identifying, not only identifying, but developing those players I identified. And then at the end of the road, added some important pieces. But Michigan last year had 5-star prospects at the quarterback position, at the running back position, at the cornerback position, and their defensive line was insanely good.
Yeah.
So that, like, Ohio State seems to me the supercharged version of that, because they have this veteran team that has been developing and on campus for 3 or 4 years that could have been playing in the NFL right now, on top of plugging holes at quarterback and safety, but then also taking luxury items. That's the third piece that we didn't mention here. Like, Quinshon Judkins was not needed.
Right.
He is a luxury piece into the offense that now might go score 15 touchdowns this year. So when you look at the way you're supposed to build a roster, the reason why Ohio State's in the position that they're in is because they have retention, they have holes filled, and they have luxury items. Like, this seems to be the triple crown of how to build a roster. Now, obviously, you still have to play the games. They still have to beat Michigan. The playoff is going to be more challenging to win now than ever before in the past. I'm not saying they're going to win the national title, but if you are, this is exactly the way you would want to build a roster, and not, you don't want to have to rely on adding Caleb Downs. You don't have to rely on adding Will Howard. You don't want to have to rely on these. And there's a lot of programs out there that are, I mean, I don't mean to bring up Florida State, but they are reliant on not only getting guys in the portal, but hitting on them. And it's really, really hard.
Well, who else does this? I'd say Georgia does this. London Humphreys, Ben Urosic. They didn't need those guys, but they're certainly welcome additions. Alabama, Parker Brailsford, Damani Jackson. Did they need them to be good this year? No, but they're welcome additions. Texas, because we can talk about them losing those receivers and needing to go out and get Isaiah Bond, but they also signed Ryan Wingo. Like,
and if Isaiah Bond was not on the team, Texas wouldn't stink.
Right.
Like, that's the thing too. I think the distinction that you make is how many teams have transfers on their team that are playing right now, where if you took those transfers away, they would stink. Like, that's not the right way to do it. And I even think last year, Florida State is the crowning example of what Portal King looks like. And they lost a player at a position that was transferred in before Norvell got there in quarterback. Now, that's not That's not their fault. They didn't make the playoff, but I don't think that any one loss, and maybe the quarterback is a bad example, but if they would have lost one of the other players, they wouldn't have stunk.
Did Ohio State need Will Howard?
I don't know that. Well, the thing is, if they didn't get Will Howard, I think they needed a quarterback.
Yeah, the Kyle McCord thing was a surprising thing. That was an anomaly. Like, what happened with Kyle McCord is not going to happen all the time. It's not going to happen.
Kyle McCord was supposed to be the quarterback this year, so they recruited well enough, and he's a 5-star player
and played great for Syracuse so far.
Has played great for Syracuse. Only lost one game. I think if the plan would have gone accordingly, Kyle McCord would be like CJ Stroud right now, and then it would just be absolutely pandemonium in Columbus. So what happens, even at places that recruit as deeply as Ohio State, is that things don't always go according to plan.
Right.
And people leave and people don't work out, and you have to be able to adjust on the fly. Now, Ohio State's got 2 5-star freshman quarterbacks on their roster, so they're probably hoping that between the two of them, they're not going to have to go get a transfer like this in the future. But at the same time, if you're asking me if they needed Will Howard, I don't know if they needed Will Howard, but if you watched the Cotton Bowl last year, they definitely needed
they needed a veteran quarterback, at least to be in the competition with those young guys. And I think that it worked out the way they wanted it to. I'm thinking of one other place, because we may be looking at a transition from Portal King to doing it the way you have to do it to really compete. And that's Ole Miss, because if you took Walter Nolan out, if you took the offensive lineman that they got out of the portal out, if you took Trey Amos out, I think Ole Miss would still be a good team.
Yeah. Well, Ole Miss is an interesting situation because
a lot of those guys were transfers already, but they've been there for 3 years now. So I don't know if it even counts.
Ole Miss has done a really good job in the transfer portal, and they went all in on guys that they are going to help them potentially win the SEC.
Right.
But I think you could probably make the luxury item distinction for a few of them. Right?
Yeah. Because I think Ole Miss would have been a potential 9 or 10 win team, even if they didn't bring anybody in out of the portal.
Yeah. Now, a 9 or 10 win team like they were last year might be the ceiling if they didn't do it. But now their ceiling is, I'm going to say it, like they could win the national title this year. For all we know. Like it's not like it's a crazy thing to say. It might be an upset, but they are in a position from a roster perspective, based on the way that they've done it, to win. Now, the difference between Ohio State and Ole Miss is that Ohio State can do this every year if they keep recruiting out of high school the same way. Ole Miss can't do this every single year because they don't recruit out of high school at a high enough level.
You have to recruit out of high school, or like do what Lane did, and you get the transfers with 3 or 4 years of eligibility remaining, and you develop
which is your recruiting.
Yeah. That's the same kind of development. It's just different. Now, Lane did that specifically for a reason. He did it because at the time, the second transfer, you had to sit out a year if you were an undergrad. That's changed. So I don't know if he can do that anymore, because if a guy comes and doesn't play, like you could develop him 2 or 3 years ago. Now he may just say, I'm going to go somewhere else and play.
But you realize what we're doing right now. We're basically having a same conversation that was a distinction in a different way 3 or 4 years ago, which is who are the programs that can win a national championship every single year, and who are the programs that might be able to win one once every 10 when the mood strikes,
right,
or when the roster strikes. Like Michigan, for instance, to me, as amazing as their season was a year ago, and we've already found out this year, isn't a team or a program that is built to win the Big Ten every year. They're going to cycle. They're going to go up and down.
Yeah.
And until they start recruiting top 5 classes or getting transfers that are really young at a high rate that have, you're not going to be able to compete with a machine like Ohio State every single year. I'm not taking away the 3-year run they've had.
Right.
But if you were a football fan that had no idea Ohio State situation in Michigan, who they were, and you're like, which team or program are you going to select for long-term success based on what you know about them while removing the logos, everybody would take Ohio State. Like, that's a fact. So, the high school piece of this gets lost, and I almost feel like we forget about how important it is because of all the extra stuff that exists now. But you need to recruit high school players, and you need to retain them if you want to be a program that can compete at a high level, not just once every 5 years, but every year.
All right. There is a program that I think can actually recruit at that level, should be recruiting at that level, and should be winning at that level. And they're trying to get back there because they hired a new coach before last season. And he kind of surprised us. But before we talk Auburn, I want to tell you a little bit about Prize Picks, the best daily fantasy game in America. You pick your squares. You pick against the number. You pick at least 2 squares, and the more squares you pick, the higher the potential payout. Use that code STAPLES, and you play $5, and you get $50 instantly to play. And also, when you're picking those squares, remember, they have college football, but they also have the NFL. They have the WNBA. They have darts. They have esports. You name it. You can pick a Caleb Williams square every week this month. And if he throws for a yard, then you win that square. Now, it wasn't a lot of yards this week, but he did throw for a yard, so you would have won that square. So if you want to dip your toe into Prize Picks, it's a good way to start. But the board will be filling up starting today for college football. So if you look at the Prize Picks board starting this afternoon, you're going to see those college football numbers coming in, because there's some really fun weekday games and some really fun noon Saturday games. So they're going to get those out early, and you're going to have a chance to test your skill against those numbers. So download that PrizePicks app, use that code STAPLES, play $5, get $50 instantly. Now, if I were making the board at PrizePicks, I would be very careful, and maybe we won't see a potential starting quarterback at Auburn. They might not be picking a number for Peyton Thorne this week, because we don't know who's going to start at Auburn. And well, let's hear what Hugh Freeze had to say on Monday.
The struggle with it's really hard to not play a young man, whether it's Peyton or whoever else it is. It's really hard for me to not play a young man that consistently is the best performer in practice over and over and over and over again, and his execution of the offense, which has been pretty clear to all of us that throughout camp and throughout the practice weeks and everything, his performance and his understanding of what we want to do has been better than the others. And if you do that, then you kind of send a message that practice really doesn't matter. Having said that, you have to carry that over into the games. You have to. And I did witness him play really, really good football in some big games last year. We've also witnessed the opposite of that in some games.
So this was not what anybody wanted, and Peyton Thorne threw 4 interceptions. Hugh Freeze in the press conference on Monday went through all 4 interceptions, and there were a couple that you could have maybe put on somebody else, but there were a couple that were just on Peyton Thorne, and you can sense the frustration in Hugh Freeze. And I understand why coaches feel this way, because this has got to be hard. We see them on Saturdays. We see the team on Saturdays, the product on Saturdays, and we're like, look, the results are all that matter. But these guys are in it every day. And so if somebody 5 days a week does all the right things, it's very hard to say you're not that guy on Saturday. But it's happened before. I'll date myself here, and this is when I was in high school. But then I learned more about this as I got to know some of these people when I was older. Danny Werfel at Florida, who ended up winning the Heisman Trophy in 1996. Danny Werfel, when he was younger, when he was like a redshirt freshman and a sophomore, would come into games and just be spectacular, lights out. And it's like, why? Terry Dean was the player who was starting at the time. And it's like, why isn't Danny Werfel the starter? Well, because Terry Dean outplayed him at practice almost every day. And it wasn't until Steve Spurrier finally just said they lost to Auburn at one point. It all comes back to Auburn. But they lost to Auburn, and Danny had come in late in the game and been great. And Spurrier's finally like, look, I just got to go with the guy who wins game, who's better in the games, because ultimately that's the job. But it's so hard when most of the days of the week, this one guy is better.
Well, I mean, like, honestly, how often do you think that's even the case?
It happens probably every year. It happens somewhere at some school.
Yeah, because the concept of gamer is just an interesting.
Well, Urban Meyer used to talk about that. He's like, there's no such thing as a gamer, because if he doesn't show in practice, it won't show in the games. But that's also not true. And he would tell you, he'd be the first to tell you if there's a guy who just shows up when the lights come on, you play him.
Oh, for sure. I mean, you have to be well, and the thing that's hard, Andy, is that you can't discover who's a gamer without putting him in the game. So, like, the Peyton Thorne scenario here is Hank Brown's the backup, right?
Right.
So, like, we're talking about a 3-star prospect who's been in the program for 1 year.
Right.
Like, that could be great, or that could be we need 3 more years of development before he's ready to go. Now, I think there's an overarching theme here, and we don't know what they're going to do at quarterback. And you could sense, like you said, the frustration on Hugh Freeze's, face and demeanor. But why is Auburn in the position that it's in to begin with?
Yes.
That's the whole thing. I do think that a lot of times we get not bogged down, but we find ourselves in conversations during the year about how could we be in this position. But we also have to analyze that Hugh Freeze came to Auburn as the master corrector of their ails, which was getting good players is important.
And what's crazy is he also took a former Auburn quarterback and turned him into a 2nd-round pick at Liberty, Malik Willis.
Yeah.
So that's the part that's crazy. But so we talked about our friend Stephen Godfrey joking over the weekend that for once Hugh Freeze is getting in trouble for not paying the player. But he said, Hugh Freeze was very clear on this in the offseason. I believe it was last offseason too. He did not want to pay 7 figures out of the portal for a quarterback because, and I understand where he's coming from on this, because that also brings in a set of expectations, a set of circumstances. And I just don't know, because that's
what they cost, Andy.
I know, but then do you have to play them? Because we're seeing this at Florida State. We're seeing this play out at Florida State. Do you have to play them at that point, or can you just give them the quick hook if it doesn't work?
Yeah, I mean, that's difficult, but it's kind of like pro sports. I mean, what do you do with your franchise player and how, you play the best player. I mean, the point, like you said, is to win the game. So, I mean, I think that you have to evaluate the same way you do when you're bringing anyone else in. And
if it doesn't work, just understand
it doesn't work.
It's a sunk cost.
It's also the peril of the business. It's not like anybody who spends a bunch of money is having 100% hit rate. So I do think that you do have to go down the rabbit hole of if you have a young, promising player and I think what we're talking about in Florida State is the perfect example. It's does Brock Glenn have any hope of being a good player, or did we give up because he got thrust into an impossible situation last year?
I actually think about what we're talking about at Florida.
Yeah, Florida.
Yeah, because whether it's money spent on a backup or on a transfer quarterback or money spent on a freshman quarterback, it's still money spent on somebody who may or may not be playing. DJ Lagway is the highest paid player at Florida. And we've been debating about whether they're going to start him against Texas A&M or not. You know how I feel about that. The only sensible solution is starting DJ Lagway, but that might not be what Billy Napier chooses. I also think the only sensible solution for Mike Norvell is give Brock Glenn a chance, because it's not working with DJU.
Yeah. That is 100%. It's almost like the same exact situation. I mean, it's a little bit different because DJ is a star and Brock Glenn was he was an Elite 11 kid. It wasn't like he's nobody, but DJ Lagway is somebody who is supposed to be a transcendent talent that changes a program. And I'm not sure that Brock Glenn came into Florida State.
But that's the thing. You keep going back to recruiting. If we're going to do that, Graham Mertz, when he came to Wisconsin, was supposed to be a transcendent program-changing quarterback.
I'm not saying that. I think that both the answers to the question is play the kid.
Yeah.
I agree with you on that, but I'm saying the pressure at Florida is higher because of the way that he was perceived. So was DJ. It's not like in the recruiting ranks. He was a 5-star kid too.
We can't mix up our DJs. DJ Uyunglele.
Oh yeah, sorry, DJU. But the thing that is, to wrap it back around to what we were talking about, Auburn doesn't have either of those things.
No, but I've seen Hugh Freeze do enough with quarterbacks who might not have been the greatest talent-wise. So I had this conversation with Hugh Freeze after he took the Auburn job. He came to the Senior Bowl to visit some people, and a bunch of us were talking to him. We were interviewing him, and after the interview was over, a couple of us were chatting with him, and he brought up the point that the most important early guy he brought in Ole Miss was Bo Wallace. And I think most people would say, oh, it was Laramie Tunsil, it was Robert Kondichi, or maybe it was Denzel Kondichi, which allowed you to get Robert and some of those other guys. But he said it was Bo Wallace because it allowed him to run the offense the way he wanted to run it. And I think we can go out on a limb and say he still hasn't found his Bo Wallace at Auburn yet. And that's the biggest issue right now, is they can't run the offense the way he wants to run it. And we've seen it run effectively with everywhere else he's been. So could Hank Brown be that guy? He's watched a lot of practices and determined that maybe he's not, but I think he's going to have to give him a chance. So let's hear a little more from Hugh Freeze on Monday.
He's the highest performer in practice and preparation, which obviously has led to us giving him the starting nod. And but there's got to be carryover into the game. And I think it was John Wooden that once said that he spoke directly about this and honoring the practice and stuff. But again, sometimes adjustments have to be made, and I assure you we're prepared if that continues. We have to go another direction.
See that, and that's the most definitive statement that we've heard from anybody. Like Norvell hasn't said anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
Napier has kind of waffled and equivocated. Like, we have not heard anybody in this situation so far this year say it that directly, like that bluntly. We're going to have to make a change because our job is to win the game. It's not to play the best practice player.
Yeah. And I mean, to even break down who looked the best in practice in such a definitive way, I think gives you some insight into the struggle that he's having. When it comes to Florida, Andy, I don't know what the struggle is.
No, that's an easy decision, I think.
Yeah.
And I actually think, because we always talk about, will a coach lose the locker room if they make this decision? Like, I don't think Hugh Freeze is in any danger of losing the locker room if he changes, because players understand. Players all want to win. Like, I don't think Billy Napier's in any danger of losing the locker room if he starts DJ Lagway.
Yeah.
Players aren't dumb. Like, I always go back to when Dabo benched Kelly Bryant and started Trevor Lawrence. And I remember talking to Christian Wilkins later that season about that day. And like, Christian Wilkins picked up Trevor Lawrence and took him out to breakfast that morning. And basically was saying, everybody's behind you. Do not worry about this. There will be no dissension when this decision is made public. We got you. Because players aren't stupid. Like, they understand Trevor Lawrence gave them the best chance to win. And
you could lose a locker room by sticking with the wrong guy for too long, too.
Agreed.
Yeah.
I think that's a bigger danger in that case. Now, it's the dynamics can get weird sometimes, but I don't think they're weird in any of these cases. I think all of these situations are situations where these teams had big expectations. So far, it has been a disaster, and you have to figure it out. So we will find out, but I am very curious to see what Hugh Freeze does here, because, again, he said it more bluntly than anybody else. And while we're on the subject of people talking bluntly, I noticed in the comments, somebody said, oh, they're talking about the Auburn QB situation in Colorado. The media is finally figuring out, no, we're going to talk a little Colorado too, because we just have to chime in on this Shedeur Sanders clip. So this is Shedeur Sanders after the Nebraska game, throwing his offensive line under the bus. That's pretty much all the intro you need for that.
I mean, how many times did Rowley get touched?
You said what?
How many times did Rowley get touched? There was able, of course, whenever you're able to run the ball consistently, and whenever you're able to, then that opens up the pass, But it's just like, you got to understand what your team good at. So it's like, why would we keep running the ball if, okay, we out there and we get in a situation where it's a must get and we don't get it?
Right. Are those kind of 4th and 1 conversions that haven't gone your guys' way in the last couple? Is that kind of play into everybody's mind? Is that kind of something on your mind when thinking about advancing the ball and whatnot?
Nah, I'd rather, if we're going to go down, I'd rather go down swinging, honestly, because I know I could throw the best punch.
I do appreciate the Sanders men in press conferences turning the questions back on. It creates a nice discussion, like a back and forth.
It's like Step Brothers. How much money do you make a year before tax?
So Shedeur threw his offensive lineman under the bus. He also threw Pat Shurmur under the bus in there too. He threw the play calling under the bus. which actually probably isn't. In both cases, he's not wrong. Like, they can't run the ball. They can't protect Shedeur, which is a problem. They can't run the ball, which is a huge problem. And he's wondering why Pat Shurmur calls runs, because they can't run the ball. But I think Pat Shurmur calls runs because at some point you have to try to run the ball. It's a pretty impossible situation when you can't block.
Yeah, well, I'm not going to sit here, and I think you might, like, people might be expecting me to be like, you can't do that. You're Listen, as a reporter and as a college football fan, you want as much interesting information. Those press conferences are made for garnering information. And if you want to know how Colorado feels about the current situation, the quarterback was honest with you about it. I'm not going to ever rail on somebody for being truthful and honest, especially considering the fact that we all know what he's saying is true.
Yeah.
That said, that doesn't mean there isn't danger in what that can do to your team, or that isn't a sign of things are starting to slip a little bit.
Yeah.
But
you don't like me? You don't like the way I block? You think I can't block for you? What if I really don't block for you?
Yeah, and like the funniest thing is that it's true that they have a hard time blocking. But you know who should have probably realized that was going to be an issue?
Deion.
His father.
Yes.
It's like, whose fault is it? You're not throwing your line under the bus. You're throwing your dad under the bus.
And here's the thing. Like, we've said all along, this might be daddy ball. And we had this in our group chat at work when one of our editors who came up through covering recruiting made the point, and it's a good one, that Deion is essentially every recruit QB dad that we've ever dealt with, just turned up to 11 and has the head coaching job.
Yeah, well, the question that you have to ask yourself, and maybe we can get into this at another time because we're not going to open up a 45-minute conversation with 4 minutes left, but what was the motivation for Deion Sanders taking the Colorado job? Was it to be a good power conference football coach?
We're learning. He didn't say Power 5.
I know.
We're learning.
Core 4 sounds like a protein drink.
It does. It sounds like a really good protein drink.
Because I like those Core Power ones. Or was it to be with his kid as he tries to get him to the NFL? Like, that's the thing. And
that's the crucial distinction, actually. And I will spoil tomorrow's show. We are going to talk about that tomorrow.
Yeah, we should, because the thing, and it's like everybody, because I've been very critical of Colorado. At first, I was very excited.
Yep.
I was very bought in on the notion of a new coach with a new angle that is as cool as Deion, doing it a new way and maybe shifting how coaching in college football works. But when you look at the behavior of the way that he has attacked this job, it leans very distinctly to one of those two things. And it's not, I have a passion for being a great coach. So we'll get into that a little bit more tomorrow. And, it's the same.
As far as Shedeur throwing the lineman under the bus, I go back and forth on this because you don't want to do that. Like, I just remember like getting yelled at by a quarterback because you missed got beat on a block. But also remember getting yelled at by a quarterback and telling the quarterback, well, on a 7-step drop, if you take a 9-step drop, that's on you. Like, you've put yourself in danger.
Yeah.
Because I'm blocking for you to be back here, not for you to be back there.
And it's not just sacks, Andy. They cannot run the football.
Yeah.
And it's just, I know they went out and they got Jordan Seaton. And getting a 5-star offensive lineman to come to Colorado is a recruiting win that Colorado could have never conceived of without Deion. So you have to give Deion flowers for doing it. He did it with Travis Hunter. He did it with his own kid. There's one more big time get, Cormani McClain, who's not there anymore, but he's done it. So the proof of the ability to do it exists, not just once, but every year he's been a coach.
Right.
So if he were to put the same effort across the board into 25 to 50 kids that might not all be 5 stars, but might be top 150, top 200, guys that can come in and play and built this roster out. It might, everybody was expecting it to be.
I don't think they have the NIL to do that. I don't think they have the war chest to do that.
They might not.
So. I think Deion can get a discount because he's Deion, but I don't know if he can get that much of a discount. But they got to survive this season. They have a line that can't block again. And you remember all the Colorado fans coming on here over the offseason when I'm like, hey, I'm a little worried that this is not the way to build an offensive line. They're like, no, it's going to be better. You don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Well, I know what I'm talking about when I say that if you have a bad offensive line, it is the one thing in football you can't fix. Like, you can't make a bad offensive line good. And if your offensive line is bad, you can never be good. So that's the problem. Now, I don't know that being nicer to them will make them block better, but I can tell you that trashing them will not make them block better either.
Well, I don't know if there's anything that you can do to make them block better because they're not blocking good because they're not up to the standard that you need to be to win a game like that.
Yeah.
So I think that if Deion Sanders attempts, even if the NIL war chest wasn't there, to build this roster in a good faith way that would be around for a while, that the tenor of our discussions about Colorado would be much different. I'm not expecting them to make the playoff this year. In year 2 of whatever,
I expect them to make a bowl game.
I expect
this year.
them
That's
to
what I
win
said.
5 or 6 games and be a fun team to watch. Deion has done that. The problem is, if he leaves at the end of the year, what has he done for the Colorado program?
He sold a shitload of tickets.
No, I'm saying for the next tenure coach.
Oh, no. It goes back to whatever it was.
Back to what it was. Yeah. And there's no roster to leave behind. There's no recruiting plan to leave behind. Not that anybody could duplicate being Deion, but putting it together with duct tape and hoping to win 6 games is not what I thought he was going to be doing as a coach.
Save this for tomorrow, because that's gonna be one of my 3 saucy takes. So we're doing our Wendy sauciest takes again. Last week it was Ari giving out the takes and me judging which the sauciest. I am gonna load up on spicy ghost pepper nuggets today, just to make sure my sauce level is as high as humanly possible, as hot as humanly possible. And I'm coming up with 3 saucy takes. One of them will be about that, I can tell you, because I've been thinking about that a lot lately. 2 more. Ari's going to decide which is the sauciest. We can't wait to talk to you tomorrow. This was so much fun. Thank you to Ryan Day. Thank you to Hugh Freeze for being very blunt about things.
Thank you to Shedeur.
And thank you to Shedeur. And we'll talk to you tomorrow.